They tried to wipe him out so thoroughly that, for centuries, his very name disappeared from Egypt's story, as if a civilization could cut a king out of its own memory and leave only a blank where he had stood. That is the mystery that haunts every block of ruined stone at Amarna. How, in the heart of one of history's most rigid traditions, a single man could remake religion, law, art, and the map of power, and then be erased as if he'd been a mistake. The first clue came from the desert itself. In the 19th century, explorers following broken hieroglyphs stumbled on a city no one recognized. Streets ran like an unfinished drawing. Temples turned their faces to a different light. Houses still held the ghost of daily life. It wasn't Thebes. It was a new capital raised in a year or two, placed where the sun fell most cleanly. A place the king called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. That should have explained something simple. A pharaoh moved his court. Instead, the city spoke with a voice nobody had heard before. The reliefs were not the stiff, eternal symbols of pharaonic rule. They were small, domestic scenes. Kings and queens playing with children, laughing, touching, naked in a private world. Statues showed a face and body stretched into forms Egyptian art had never carved. Elongated skull, full lips, a belly that curved like a woman's. This new style was not just art. It was a public argument. Whoever this king was, he wanted Egypt to see him differently. Then came the religion itself, the Aten. Where Egypt had accommodated a pantheon, this court built altars for a single luminous disk. Rays ended in hands that touched the king's forehead. The sun was not merely one god among many, it was the source and center. Priests of old gods found their revenue cut, their temples abandoned. The king did not just exalt a deity, he chained the state to a single theology and moved its center to a blank patch of desert. That was a political decision as much as a spiritual one. The next unexpected detail, his queen was everywhere. Nefertiti's name appears on monuments as if she co-ruled. In intimate scenes she stands at the king's side, crowned, powerful, visible. For a civilization obsessed with hierarchy, this was a shock. Had Akhenaten elevated a partner to equal status? Or had she become the face of a new ideology? For the first time we see a royal couple not as remote gods, but as human actors, making choices and steering a nation. Foreign letters, the thin reeds of diplomacy preserved in clay, later found near the old court, delivered another blow to the tidy story. They are plaintive, panicked. Vassal kings write of attackers at their gates, of pleas unanswered. Where Egypt once projected control, suddenly there are cry for help messages. Help us, they say, our lands are lost. It's a small paper trail of chaos. Was the move to the new religion and capital a spiritual conviction or a gamble that left borders bare and enemies emboldened? Then something even stranger. The city appears to have been abandoned in a hurry. Pots left in ovens, workshops quiet, tombs left half-painted. That means the court did not plan a ceremonial transfer back to the old center. It left as if pulled away. When a regime collapses, people negotiate. When they flee, the map is scorched. The silence of Akhetaten feels like a whisper after a scream. What followed was not mere repeal, it was vengeance. Successor kings set out to erase the ruler who had set this experiment in motion. Sculptures were smashed. Cartouches, those ovals that kept a king's name safe for eternity, were gouged open and the name removed. Priests of the old gods restored temples and ceremonies with furious intensity. It was as if the country had decided that the safest course was to pretend the blasphemy had never happened. At this point, historians thought they had a tidy moral, an eccentric pharaoh, a failed experiment, a restored orthodoxy. But then archaeologists began to read the ruins with a different ear. Artifacts beneath the rubble suggested the artist's stylizations were consistent, deliberate, and persistent in private. Certain statues of the king were not randomly distorted, they followed a visual program. Some scholars whispered a theory that changed everything. Maybe Akhenaten was not only a religious revolutionary, but a prophet king attempting to redefine the relationship between ruler and deity, between intimacy and divinity. That interpretation tempted a darker riddle. Why erase him so completely if his reign had been merely unpopular? The anger appears targeted not at his policies, but at his personhood. The defacement was surgical. It was personal. The old priests didn't just want the city gone, they wanted the idea of this king gone. So what was he that needed extermination from memory? A heretic? A tyrant? A visionary? Another discovery complicated the tale even further. Some bones and skeletal remains from the period show signs of unusual health patterns. Later artists show a royal body that combines masculine and feminine traits. Was that an accurate portrait of Akhenaten's body? Some genetic or endocrine condition, or an intentional theological symbol meant to show a ruler embodying the totality of life? If the images are literal evidence, they make the king's difference, biological as well as ideological. If they are symbolic, they make the art an experiment in metaphors powerful enough to threaten a priesthood. Either way, the king's very flesh became part of the debate, and the ripple keeps widening. Tutankhamun, who would later be the boy king who re-established the old gods, comes into focus not as an avenger but as a reluctant figure tied to the crisis. His small tomb, found millennia later stuffed with treasures, looks almost like a hurried patch on a broken state. Why restore the old temples and erase a man who once made the sun the only god? Why then let the new order collapse into the very chaos the letters had warned of? Each action pointed to desperate human decisions: counselors, priests, wives, soldiers, sons, people choosing restoration over revolution. The biggest revelation of all is also the bleakest: you cannot truly erase an idea by smashing stone. The style, the questions, the audacity survived in pockets, stories told by eunuchs and scribes, fragments of hymns and, most unsettlingly, in later religious thought that elevates a single divine principle above a pantheon. The repressed experiment seeded a contagion of thought that outlived the temples that had tried to smother it. What remains today are ruins that still face the sunrise, broken statues whose missing names draw your eye like a blank eye socket, and a problem historians cannot stitch neatly back together. Was Akhenaten the first monotheist, a lone prophet before prophets? Was he a political hubris who bankrupted an empire? A visionary painter king, or a heretic whose body and theology alarmed a frightened priesthood? The stones do not tell us which. You can walk through the empty colonnades at dawn and feel the same sunlight he declared central to everything. You can stand between smashed statues and know that memory is a tool of power. Whoever writes history decides what is allowed to live. And in those smashed cartouches is the most dangerous human thing: a reminder that people feared not only a king's policies, but the very possibility of being made to see the world differently. So we leave the site without a tidy end. Akhenaten's name is both gone and everywhere. Gone from many monuments, everywhere in the questions he forced Egypt to ask. Did the world he tried to make die with him, or did it travel in secret, disguised, until it could become something else? The ruins give no answer. Only a sun that still rises over a palace no one wanted to remember, and a question that refuses to be smashed into silence.